Welcome to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio, bringing you insights and strategies to help you create a magnificent and fulfilling second half of life. Here's your host, certified professional retirement coach and best-selling author, Dr. Dorian Mintzer.
I want to welcome everybody to my fourth Tuesday Revolutionize Your Retirement Interview with Expert series. And I am so delighted today to have Mark Fisher and Lucy Rose Fischer. I was introduced to them through my dear friend and colleague Jan Hively, who knows them from her Minnesota days. And I have to say, one of the things I love about doing this program is I get to read these, wonderful books when the presenters are authors. And Mark's book, Serious About Retiring, is so helpful and just so well and easily readable, so well written. So I really want to recommend it. And Lucy Rose Fischer's book, and I'll tell you a little about each of them. There are two that are available now. One, I'm New at Being Old, and the other, Grow Old with Me. And there's a new one coming out called The Journalist. It'll be out in August. As I mentioned before, if some of you came on late, they're gems. Her artwork is wonderful and the narrative is wonderful. So let's just get started here. I'm just so delighted that you're both with us today. And I really would like to just start by asking each of you, well, I'll start with you, Mark, and then Lucy Rose, about what first kind of got you interested in focusing on this stage of life. And then we'll go forward, and then I'm going to let you, just go ahead with your slides too.
When I was in my early 40s, I started a career as a financial planner, and many of my clients were about my age, and we sort of aged in place together. So as I grew older, they grew older, and many of them started to be more and more concerned with retirement issues. And so more and more we had discussions which eventually ended up with my book, Serious About Retirement. So on this first slide is a mugshot of each of us. And in the backgrounds are our passions here. Lucy Rose has some artwork behind her, and I don't call it my cello, I call it my beloved cello here with me. And on the next slide is a picture of me on a bicycle playing my cello and a copy of my book, which are my major activities. I should tell you, it was almost 20 years ago that I had a heart attack, which precipitated my asking, what am I here for? I was grateful to be alive. I had almost died from it. And I concluded that a major mission for me was being there for other people, helping them at the different stages of their life, and that encouraged me to continue work as a financial planner. And now that I've retired as of last December, I'm starting a new career as a retirement coach, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later.
Great, thank you. And Lucy Rose, what got you interested in this stage of life and working on it? Yeah.
Actually, I was a gerontologist. I got a Ph.D. in sociology, and I had a long career as a gerontologist. And then it was interesting. I reached a stage of life when I was the subject of my studies, and I was surprised. And what really shocked me was that I was surprised. If I'd studied this for so many years, how could I be surprised when the two of us, we're dealing with this on our own? So we have a slide from my We're Old With Me book. We're looking at each other. How did we get to be so old? A lot of the work that I've done recently as an artist has been sort of a whimsical perspective on aging. So I have this, the next slide shows a woman basically screaming, and she says, one morning I woke up and didn't recognize myself. And there is sort of that experience of shock. I think that happens not just to gerontologists, but to all of us, as we know that aging is part of life, but somehow it's not supposed to apply to us. Mark's heart attack almost 20 years ago had a huge impact on both of us. And for me, I had been an artist on the side. I'd been a sociologist. I taught. I did research for many, many years. I wrote other books, more academic books. And then when he had his heart attack, it was like you start thinking about yourself in terms of how much time do I have left. And I decided I needed to spend some of my life really focusing on my art. It was my passion. It was something that I loved. I hadn't actually studied art, except I used to paint with my mother-in-law. Mark's mother, we didn't live in the same town, but when we visited, she would be so generous in teaching me art. And so on this slide, there's pictures of some of my art. And what I do is kind of unusual. I paint upside down, inside out, and backward on hand-blown glass. So, and I kind of taught myself to do that. And, I know that the Chinese have a way of painting on glass, but I didn't really know how to do it, except I sort of developed my own technique by myself. And when I was pretty new as an artist, I founded an art group in the Twin Cities. Initially, it was the Jewish Women's Artist Circle. It has now become the Interfaith Artist Circle, and we've been doing exhibits all over, and we study about religious and philosophical and spiritual issues, and we create art, and that's been a really exciting part of my life too.
Do you want to give an example of a theme that your art group worked on?
Well, the most recent one is called Visual Prayer, and then we did one on life, loss, and legacy, one Visions of the Soul. So we've been doing art about this for quite a while, and I also, around the time that I started my art career, I wrote a book that you referred to. It's called I Knew It Being Old. It won a couple of awards, and it kind of combined my own experience growing old with my background as a gerontologist and my art. And so I've got a few slides. There's one that shows like a outer space. There's older people in outer space, and then there's one woman carrying a suitcase which actually is pictures of me when I was young on this decorating the suitcase. And it says, I'm venturing into outer space, traveling toward an alien universe, the galaxy of the old ones. My baggage is stuffed with younger versions of myself. Am I ready for this journey? And the next one that I'm going to show you, these are just examples of pages in the book. It shows figures of women in jars and on shelves, like specimens. So it says, sometimes younger people seem to regard older women like me as odd specimens of a different species. And then the next one, it's me holding up their words floating all around me. And it says, I've begun to lose words, especially proper names. Names of people and places and ordinary words float away. I'm reluctant to make introductions. In the middle of a sentence, I might forget the name of a good friend. And then the next one is, there's a woman lying there, and there are these strands just of brain just pouring out of her head. And it says, this could be the beginning of the unraveling of my mind. And then the next one is a woman with marbles, and it says, but at least for now, I still have all my marbles. However, you notice that some of these marbles are starting to roll away. And then the last one, the last sample from this is, it's a woman surrounded by art. She's just lying as if she's giving birth. And it says, I'm launching a new life as an artist. Luminous colors spill out of me. I bear visions, images, art.
so wonderful, Lucy Rose. As I said, if those of you who came on late, her books are just gems with the art and with the narratives that go with it. And Sam from Philadelphia says that the mini bios that I gave of you don't tell us how old you are and when you started this aspect of your career. So could you each speak to that? I think you might have mentioned that, Lucy Rose, about maybe around 60 you started? Go ahead.
60. Yeah. I was 60 when I started my art career, and Mark is 40s when he started.
Yeah, I started my financial planning career in my 40s. In some ways, it felt like I had actually retired because I had converted my hobby into my profession. I took up cello at age 73, and next week will be 4 years. So I think you can do the arithmetic here to determine my age. And I retired at age 76 last December, and I'm starting a new career at age 77.
And I'm 75 now.
Right, great. So we're all in the same ballpark, or at least I am as the host here, since I'm 74 and doing this. So.
Oh, you're a youngster.
Right, I'm the spring chicken here. So, Mark, you say that the older years can be the best of your years of your life. Why do you say that?
Well, first of all, I've got a slide here about the age revolution, and in terms of the best years, there are actually more than you may appreciate. So in 1900, life expectancy from birth was 47, and at the beginning of Social Security in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, you had to be 65 to collect, but the average lifespan was 63. So they didn't exactly expect to pay a lot of people Social Security benefits. Now, someone born has a life expectancy of 79, but that doesn't really tell the whole story here. On the next slide, I have life expectancy at different ages. So, for example, if you're 65, we're talking not about 15 years of retirement, but we're talking about 20 years of retirement. And many people live 30 years after 65 into their 90s, and some even longer than that. So in terms of the best years of your life, the first comment I wanted to make is there are a lot of them. I had trouble grasping what it would mean, say, to live another 20 years. And so what I did was I thought about a young child, let's say born until age 20, and you think about all of the development that goes on over those years is just amazing. And we have the same possibilities here. 21.9 years is 8,000 days. So we have a lot of opportunity to do things, and that was part of my motivation for taking up cello when I knew it was going to take a long time for me to sound anything at all like Yo-Yo Ma. Actually, never, but I undertook it anyway. We should be thinking about this time as similar to a college graduate who is looking forward to a new career, thinking about the opportunities, the choices to make. Some concern, is the choice going to be right? Hopeful for the college student that they'll earn enough money to support themselves, maybe buy a house, maybe have a family someday. So here we are in post-65, let's say, with new opportunities and some anxieties. But the key difference here is that we have a lot more resources than a college student. Think about it. We have more money. We're actually, hopefully, don't have student debt anymore, whereas a new college graduate does, and you may have something saved up. We have decades of skills that we've developed, experiences we've had, and networks of people from past things that we have done. All of these are resources for us to use in that next stage of our life.
Great. I must say that some people, however, do have debt, unfortunately, because of supporting their kids or themselves of continuing education.
Yes.
But in general, I agree with you.
And I think for people who find themselves short on money, it takes more creativity, I believe, in order to figure this out. We have all kinds of examples of people who earn way less, who have way less accumulated, and they figure out less expensive ways to travel. They still get together with friends, and they may continue working during retirement, doing something that they prefer over what they had done when money was important for different reasons.
Great points. And Lucy Rose, I know as a researcher, you developed what you call the ALIVE model, ALIVE. Can you tell us what that's all about?
Right. That's a concept that I developed with some colleagues in my research days, and it means a lot to me now too. The ALIVE concept ALIVE is an acronym, and it stands for activity, learning, intimacy, vitality, and engagement. These are 5 factors that make for a really good life, including a life in older years, actually a life anytime. Activity refers to physical activity, to physical exercise. There is a huge wealth of research showing the benefits of physical exercise, both to physical health, mortality, and also to mental health, to cognitive health, to being able to keep your mind. And physical exercise does not mean having to run a marathon. It doesn't mean doing extreme exercise, and it could be started at any age. If you're 80 and you start walking a few times a week, it can have a huge impact. Now that, we're in the pandemic, the one thing that I really can do is I continue walking. I do wear masks when I walk, but I can feel it in myself how important that is. Physical exercise is absolutely important. The L is for learning. And as one of the famous gerontologists talks about, it means sweating with your mind. And it can mean many different things. Learning can mean through books, through courses, through studying the cello. It can mean through studying a language. But it really means using your mind. I think one of the things that so many of us worry about is, the various kinds of dementia. And it's a disease, and I can't guarantee that I won't get it or that anyone won't get it, but there is some research that if you continue actively learning, you can postpone getting the clinical symptoms of dementia. And for me, that's worth it in itself. Besides, learning is by itself an enjoyable activity. The third element is intimacy, and that refers to having a close relationship, having somebody who really knows you, whom you can share your heart with. The opposite of that is really isolation. And isolation is one of the big risks of advanced age, that you lose people who are close to you. And it takes effort in all of these aspects. As we get older, it takes more effort to ensure that we have these things. Social isolation is as dangerous to our health as smoking, which I think is really a striking factor. The fourth element is vitality, and that's that kind of social psychological aspect, the optimism, the sense of energy. And, some of that's innate and some of it's something that you can work with. I happen to be married to the most optimistic person I know. And you know what? It's annoying. He's the person who gets up in the morning and is absolutely ready to go. He studied cello. He began studying cello at age 73. Somebody told him that you have to have 10,000 hours of
that's from Malcolm Gladwell, to become an expert.
You have to have 10,000 hours. So he figures by the time he's 118, he'll be good at it. That's optimism.
That's
and
optimism.
Finally, the fifth element is engagement. And that's different from intimacy. It means being involved with the wider society. And that also is one of the issues that can change and that's at risk with aging. If we stop our more formal relationships with work, for example, you lose some of those ties, and it takes effort to make sure you remain engaged. I like the alive concept, particularly because of the word alive. Mm-hmm. For me, that's my mission. My mission is to be really, truly alive as long as I'm on this side of the as long as I'm alive, but to be really alive.
I really like that acronym a lot. It speaks to all these things that we know are important: connection, engagement, purpose and meaning, vitality, important relationships, lifelong learning. I mean, it's a great word to have. I think you're absolutely right. So,
and it has meaning in itself too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Mark, I just want to shift. I want to mention something about your book, too, which I found really, really interesting, that in addition to his writing it in a way that I think just is very clear and sort of step-by-step of things to think about in terms of preparing for retirement and a lot of the financial parts, he does this really lovely thing where he has a kind of a family he introduces us to, which is a composite of people, but it's people of different generations. And so throughout the book, there are these examples of the Miller family. And I just found that a really creative way to talk about, so that it's, we get introduced to the different family members, and then as he talks about the different elements of it, he refers to sort of what the different family members have, potentially need to think about in relation to the other generations or each other. So I just wanted to compliment you on your kind of writing it that way. So why don't you, I know you've helped so many people with transitions to retirement. What do you see as the major challenges, and what would be helpful for people to start thinking about?
Well, in the past, I thought about two major challenges were what to do with your time and what to do with your money, particularly if you have a long life. So with the time, it means doing things so you have a meaningful life, or the way I described it in my book, things to get you up in the morning, excited to be alive and go out and do things. The money lets you sleep at night so you don't worry about it. It's to support a good life. As I thought about it, there are two other challenges that I wanted to mention. One is managing expectations. So many people start thinking seriously about retirement, let's say, 10 years before, plus or minus, that magic year when they expect that to happen, and their expectations build, the excitement builds for many, not everyone. Some people are retired not because they want it to be, but they may have lost the job, and all of a sudden they're faced with what they're going to do, and so they have to condense a long period into a very short period. But if there is the luxury of that time, people get excited, and it's sort of like preparations for marriage, and you start getting excited about that, thinking about the honeymoon, which hopefully is a great experience. And then the honeymoon is over, and the couple is surprised that, they don't live happily ever after automatically. Sure, they may have a very happy marriage, but frankly, it takes work to have a good relationship, especially a lot of communication. And so in the retirement area, what happens is here you have people all excited about it, and there may be a flurry of activity in the first year or two. There's more flexibility and freedom. And so all that travel that they were thinking about, if we're post-pandemic, of course. They want to go out and do the travel, they want to get together with relatives, and then they have a backlog of activities. But nevertheless, on average, a year or two after retirement, people end up confronting what do they really want to do with the rest of their lives. And it helps if you're prepared and have thought some of that through and talked it over with other people. So I mentioned that as a challenge here. And the fourth challenge is adjusting to health limitations. As you get older, the odds are you will develop one or more chronic condition. Fortunately, we live at a time when most of those chronic conditions can be managed with meds, sometimes surgery, and so we can live with formerly fatal or painful conditions way longer. I learned from a sociologist, namely my wife, that a longer lifetime does not mean more years of being sick. It means more good years, and then in the end, okay, maybe you get sick or deteriorate and die. So there are adjustments to be made, and frankly, I think, here's my editorial comment on the pandemic, I think the pandemic is actually similar to retirement in the sense that we have limitations where we can go and what we can do. And in retirement, it may be from the health situation, but a successful retirement and a successful experience during the pandemic is adjusting to those limitations as best as we can, knowing it could be better. Nevertheless, it's helpful to think seriously about that and make the adjustments as needed. That was my short sermon here. And one of the tools, I think, for having a great retirement is thinking big. And BIG is an acronym for bold, imaginative goals. And so on the slide, I've listed starting a business, learning a skill, another language, tap dancing, playing the piano, developing a hobby, or changing the world. And I just wanted to briefly mention, for me, thinking big as I thought about this, and I mentioned that the activities that I enjoy in retirement are biking and cello. So I have established big goals for both of those. So for my biking, I actually, after my heart attack, when I needed to get more exercise and I was getting bored with a treadmill, I invited a friend, and he and I biked the entire Mississippi from Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota down to New Orleans. We did this in 6 one-week intervals spread over 6 years, where each year we picked up where we had left off in the previous year, and it was really fun and really meaningful. And I want to reemphasize, it didn't cost us a lot of money to do, but it was still a mobilizing and important activity. And for me with a cello, I have a personal goal to be good enough to play some late Beethoven in a string quartet with the same group twice. Now, you may say, well, why twice? And the answer is, anybody might be able to get invited once, but to get asked back, you have to be good enough. So that's my big goal with the cello.
Very creative, I must say. Both of you are very, very creative in that. I want to integrate a couple of things that have come up as we go along. So we'll comment first from Jan, who I mentioned at the beginning was the way that Mark and Lucy Rose. And Jan from Cape Cod says, here are 3 gifts that I've received from Mark. A plan for life that can be a long life thanks to his guidance for financial planning, the sense of personal freedom that comes with that, and seeing the synchronicity that is possible in an intimate relationship thanks to watching Mark and Lucy Rose interact. So I just wanted to comment on that partway through here. And then for Denise from Cochrane, I just want to, and again, we'll mention the books and maybe we'll kind of move into that a little bit more, Lucy Rose, but just to let you know that the books, the two recent books that are already out are I'm New at Being Old and Grow Old with Me. And they're wonderful, as I said, and you can get them on Amazon. And so then I have two things sort of tied in with how to be healthy, sort of part of the Alive model that I think feels good to integrate right now. So Norman from Long Beach says, I feel that if we eat healthy and keep active, we can enjoy our years as long as we can. And Jill from Fox Island, Washington says, I'm a physician and more I've come to believe in managing chronic conditions with diet, whole food, plant-based, and other lifestyle changes rather than with medications. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
I have a couple comments. I think in the health area that we're a product of our habits. So I think everybody knows that we should get exercise, we should be eating properly, we should get enough sleep each night, but we don't do it. I have a colleague who talks about the weight loss area. It's a $36 billion industry with a 90% failure rate. How many people make resolutions in the beginning of the year and don't carry through that? So if we're a product of our habits, I think the answer is learning how to change your habits in introducing new habits. And I don't have the answer to that, but 2 days ago, I downloaded a book by someone who's considered to be the foremost expert on creating habits. His name is B.J. Fogg, F-O-G-G. And so I have to read the book first before I'm an expert on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to, we happen to be vegetarian, so I really agree with that perspective. And
tell them why we're vegetarians.
I like animals. You know, I'm concerned about the health of the chickens as much as my own health. But I mean, we do take seriously the diet and exercise issues. And as I mentioned before, it takes effort to do that. But Mark is right. Once you get into a habit, then it becomes part
easier.
It becomes part of what you do. And I also think that you know, there's wonderful medications out there for conditions that we have, but a lot can be modified with our diet and exercise as well. So I actually agree with that.
Yeah, one of my chronic conditions is diabetes, and I have a friend who decided that he was going to beat his diabetes. So what he did was he exercises 8 to 10 hours a day, and sure enough, his glucose levels went down to the normal level. I think for me, it's a compromise where I get exercise, which I know helps. I have a diet that helps, but I use the meds so that I don't have to spend 10 hours a day exercising.
So maybe talk a little bit more of the approach that you take, Mark, and then we'll come back to Lucy Rose and her book. But, you know, sort of the approach you have of how to make retirement years the best time of your life, and how your book and the coaching you do and the web course and all, how that fits into it.
Well, as I think primarily from the area of activity, I focus a lot on what I'm going to do with my time. I will confess here that Lucy Rose and I have many discussions about how I am overdoing it, perhaps undertaking way more than is humanly possible, but I just find that, for me, a very exciting way to live. I do a lot of learning. I'm using this quarantine time during the pandemic to take some courses, and I took an accreditation course for my work on retirement coaching, and I'm taking a 15-week course on online courses. And Lucy Rose, what about your coursework? What are you doing? How about your Hebrew course?
Oh, I'm starting. I study a little bit of Hebrew too.
So learning is a part of that, and then it's really the other activities that I described. I try to think for my activities, how can I make them bigger? More challenging, more fun, more exciting. Some people say, you can do something that is wonderful. Yes, it takes more creativity and time and resources, but not in proportion. Something could be way more wonderful for somewhat more of the resources here.
It's interesting to think about, yeah. So shifting a little bit more to you, Lucy Rose, in your books, I knew it being old and grow old with me. They're really very whimsical. So how do you feel about your own aging? And I do want to, there was one question somebody I think came on a little bit late. You're not going to get the slides, but you'll get a PDF of the slides. So you'll be able to see the slides. And I truly do recommend both, all of these books. The fact that you haven't done any formal art work, you said, or art training, I guess, Lucy. I mean, they're just wonderful. So, but anyway, they are so whimsical. And how do you feel about your own aging? And tell us about that.
My own aging? Well, to a large extent, I think I'm in denial, like maybe most of us. It's like I think of myself as who I used to be, my younger self, until I look in the mirror, and who is that? To a large degree, I deal with my aging through my art, through my whimsical art. A lot of the glass art I do is about aging. There's a picture on the screen it's kind of a more than life-size, sort of a self-portrait, and it says the breakdown of movable parts. This piece has over 100 pieces of hardware in it. You think about our bodies, it's just like, if you're driving an old car, all the movable parts, tend to rust, they tend to wear out. And so even the same is true of our knees and our shoulders and we are all made up of movable parts. So we're at risk. And so the way I deal with it is basically with whimsy, just dealing with the fact that, if you can't change it, then laugh about it. I'm also really grateful for my life. I'm grateful for Mark, and I'll talk a little bit later about, how we met and everything, but I think it's amazing that we have each other, and I'm grateful for every day that we do. And for my health, again, for every day that I have my good health, it's just something that I really appreciate. And I believe that this has been the richest time of my life. It just amazes me. It wasn't anything when I would have looked ahead at what my life would be at age 75. I would never have thought that it would be this rich. Yeah. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about just the richness of my days.
I remember, say, 20, 30 years ago thinking that I would reach a certain age and I would just slow down and relax. And believe me, that is not what has happened. We're using our freedom and our resources to do as much as we can. We fully appreciate we may not have as good health or resources in the future, but sort of making hay while the sun still shines. Even in a cloudy day, there's some sun. So.
My optimist husband.
And you both have been married how many years now?
54.
54 years. So we've known each other 58 years.
Right.
So we were youngsters. And so Lucy Rose she'll tell you a little bit about that story right over here.
I thought you were going to talk about
No.
Okay. All right. My book, Grow Old With Me, is a follow-up to my last book, but it's a little bit different. It's It's about us. It's about a happy marriage and a long happy marriage. And it starts out with our meeting. When we met, we were both at the university, and I was 18, Mark was a sophisticated sophomore. And, the image that's on the screen shows a university campus with sex hormones hovering in the air. And that's what the university is really like. Forget about books and learning. It's all about the sex hormones that are just aggregated there with the students. So
we used to go to the library and giggle.
Right. And so I've just showed just a few images, and then we got married. I grew up in a small town in Upper New York State. We got married in December on Christmas vacation from school, and the blizzard happened the night before our wedding, and so there's a picture of sort of this bride and groom floating in the air with snowflakes everywhere and snow on the ground. And somehow our wedding guest came anyway. And the book sort of goes through the history of what life is like, and it includes growing old together. There's an image of a resort. We were at a resort, and I was sitting by the swimming pool. And, a swimming pool, I didn't have my glasses on. I'm looking across the pool at this older man, and he's got balding and gray hair, and I can see kind of a little bit bulging tummy. And I'm thinking, there's an older man. And then all of a sudden I realized, that's just not an older man. That's Mark. That's my husband.
As I said, it's a gem of a book. Both of them.
I've been working on a series, and being in the house now, I've had time to do some art about the pandemic. I've been doing a series of whimsical paintings, and the three that I show, one of them is what I call the pandemic dance. And there's these figures sort of leaping in the air. And that's what it feels like when I walk down the streets these days. I'm just trying to avoid people. And then the next one is people in masks. And I call that it says high fashion, the haute couture. It's the high fashion today is how wonderful your mask is that you're wearing out in public. And the third one is about people demonstrating, because in the midst of the pandemic, there was this horrible thing that happened, and it sparked a movement for justice, and hopefully something good will happen too. So I'm also, as you mentioned earlier, I have, and just one other thing, I do a newsletter. So anybody who wants to sign up for my newsletter, just go on my website. I think the website is listed on the handout. It's Lucy Rose Designs. So I have a new book that's coming out in August. It's called The Journalist: Life and Loss in America's Secret War. And it's odd because I've been working so much in aging, and this is something completely different. My brother was a journalist in the early 1960s, during the early years of the Vietnam War. He was an artist and a writer, and he sort of stumbled into a journalism career. He was an amazing figure, and his story was just so interesting. So I've been working on this book for decades, and now it's coming out. It's gotten some really nice reviews, advanced reviews, and it's just a fascinating story of a young man. I've listed him as first author, even though he died. When the book comes out, he will have died 55 years since he died in a plane crash in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And so it was like I was writing this book I based it on his journals and letters and other writings. So I used his writings, I used my own writing, and I wrote it in his voice. And it's his story that he's telling himself. So anyway, that's my latest thing. It's as if it gives a whole new meaning to the term ghostwriting. It's like writing with ghosts.
That is true. I'm looking forward to. I have pre-ordered it, so I'm looking forward to reading that. Let me integrate a few other things before we get back to you, Mark, on kind of the things you're doing now, too. So Sarah had a few comments tied in with, some of the things we've been talking about, that the current issue of the Harvard Health Letter has 2 great articles on living room workouts and learning new things at home. And also, if a person searches online for MOOCs, MOOCs, massive open online courses, there are hundreds of subjects to learn. And then she also has a comment. She says, I'm semi-retired and is her 92-year-old mother's caregiver for financial and health issues. Between being available for her and the pandemic, my dream of travel isn't possible for the foreseeable future. Your discussion is very helpful, and I'm interested in the books you both have written. Thank you for being here today. And Norman from Long Beach says, you two are very lucky to have each other. I do want to comment on that. And then at the beginning, I did mention, and maybe we can, as there's a little time, Larry from Connecticut, way before we even started, had asked issues about, for both of you, given what's happening here in the U.S. and the world with health, jobs, racism, what are your emotional goals and directions? And I think you've talked a little about that with your artwork, Lucy Rose, but I want to just kind of put it out there. And to also comment that Roy from Chapel Hill is with us, and he said, so I just turned 91, so what? Just as a comment of that. So Mark, maybe you want to share a little of both what you're working on now and just maybe a little of the specific ways that your book can be of help to people?
Well, I think that the book is full of planning ideas. It's a little bit of a how-to, pointing out a lot of the alternatives people have in a wide range of different areas. And when I retired in December and realized I have way too much energy to stop working and doing things, I decided to become a retirement coach, and in particular help people in the non-investment parts of retirement. I think that the financial industry is very successful in describing retirement as a financial issue. And it's true, retirement is a financial issue, but most people spend their waking hours on their activities. And so as I develop my coaching and course work that I'm going to be offering, that's going to deal specifically with those issues. In terms of the pandemic, about 10 weeks ago, I started a series of blogs that are sort of about the pandemic time and sort of about retirement time, because I mentioned earlier, I think that the two have some relationships. And so I had one, and I find this therapeutic for myself to write these articles. So I noticed, for example, that people were asking each other, how are you coping with the pandemic? And it dawned on me, coping is great, but thriving is better. So I wanted to turn that question on its ear and say, well, okay, great, we're coping, but what can we do to make this time in the pandemic meaningful for us? It's not that we coped with it and we made it through, which is of course way better than the alternative, but with all of this time, this is a huge, huge resource to do things, some of which are probably going to be leisure, but there are other things that we can do to make this a meaningful time.
Yeah, as I say, I've been doing a series of art about the whimsical art about the pandemic, and to some degree, I've been so lucky. One of the images is of us in our home, and we're in a gilded cage. It's literally a picture of a cage with us sitting in it. So it's a difficult time, but it's also, there's so many people who have so much more difficulty. it would be easy to sort of feel despairing about the world right now because things are so difficult. But
and uncertain.
And uncertain. There's a sort of sense of uncertainty. You know, I try. I'm not always successful, but I try to sort of be grateful for each moment that I have and to focus on that.
Oh, and one thing, Lucy, I should mention about Lucy Rose. We live in the senior facility in downtown Minneapolis, and a lot of the units in our rental units are single people, including a number of widows.
Yeah, so
and so she is reaching out to a couple of them, making sure she's in contact with them on a regular basis to cut down on some of that loneliness that people have.
I also started a conversation over Zoom to try to deal with the issue of social isolation. So, for example, they're starting, and one of the things we decided to do was start a resident-run newsletter to just keep in touch with people.
Yeah, management has their take on things, but residents have a different take.
So you know, trying in my small way just to do some work on that.
That's great. So a couple more, well, one person, it leads into my giving the code in a moment, I think. So Pamela from Winston-Salem wants to know, Mark, where did you obtain your retirement coaching credential?
Well, thank you for asking. I found out there is a program called Certified Professional Retirement.
Happens to be the one I'm part of. So,
and the two main developers are Robert Laura, a certified financial planner, and Dorian Mintzer, the host of this series. So I must say it's a privilege to be a part of this with a mentor for me.
And Rosemary from Delray Beach says, how are you reaching potential clients as a retirement coach?
I have not worked that all out yet. I'm starting with people that I have known for years, I'm going to my network. I have made it a point of introducing myself to people on LinkedIn. For some people, it's about just getting a connection and being there. But I realized that this is actually a huge resource. So I've had, in the last few weeks, a couple dozen meetings with strangers on LinkedIn, and it's possible some of them may be interested in being clients. It's my hope that the coaching I do and the coursework I do is so good that they will give testimonials and refer my services to other people who are of interest, might be interested in it.
And, I mean, this is, as you say, it's your encore career. You just have been starting working on this. And you have the advantage of having been a financial planner for a long time. So,
exactly,
you know, as you say, it's going to... Yeah.
The term that I use is my next stage, which I greatly prefer over the term retirement because that has the connotation of being tired, which I get tired. I take naps, that's fine. But I like next stage, looking forward into the future with a hope that it will be our best years yet. I mean, we'll see. But I know if we don't try to make it our best years, it certainly won't be.
Great. And Lourdes from the UK says, thank you for your inspirational talk. When I reached my 60s, a new question came to me. Just as you ask a young child, what do you want to be when you grow up? I asked myself, what kind of little old lady do I want to grow into?
Yeah.
Great question.
I think that's lovely. So I don't see any other questions here right now, so I'm going to turn it, Norman. I'm 65 and my current job is ending Friday, so I'm unsure what the next stage will be like, but I will try to follow your fine examples.
Can I give a very concrete suggestion to Norman? Develop what's called a curious list. Mm-hmm. So take out a piece of paper and start writing down things that you're just a little bit curious about, and go for quantity. It's not about finding one thing, but generate a lot of ideas and then just start thinking about what it might mean to explore some of them.
That's a great idea. It's an offshoot, a little different from the bucket list, which is, places maybe you want to go or do. And I love the concept of the curious list. It's actually from the retirement coaching program, although I think probably others think about it. But and it's just so nice to just, just what things interest you. What are you curious about? It can open up so many areas. So this has just been wonderful, but I want to give each of you an opportunity for final comments, takeaways. You are a very inspirational dynamic duo couple. And it's just been a pleasure both reading your book, Mark, and your books, Lucy Rose, and I'm looking forward to the new one. But what final takeaways would you like each of you? You can decide who wants to go first, but just, that you'd like to leave people with.
In terms of advice, think about going a little bit outside of your comfort zone when you think of some alternatives, and also think about the notion of exploring, which means if you go to your curious list and you do some research or think about it or read or take a course, it doesn't have to be forever. I mean, you got 8,000 days we're talking about here. If you're lucky enough, you find something early on, then think about what you can do with it to make it a bigger activity. Liz?
Well, I was thinking about the person who called in and said, I just turned 92 and so what? I mean, one of the amazing things about now versus in past times is that many people do live, and they live, reasonably good lives into quite old years, so that this space of time really could be many years. There's no guarantee, so we need to live each day as if it's precious. But that's true when you're 20 also. But I think, that we can think about this life as a really important part of our life. It's not just they used to talk about, sort of the ending of it. I feel like this is the beginning of a whole new stage. And at 75, I'm not young, but I still feel like I'm, entering a whole new stage of my life. That's very exciting. And so, my advice is go for it.
Nice optimistic advice too, but I like what you were saying. It's sort of a realistic optimism that we don't know what's definitely ahead, but to go for it. And there have been a couple of other comments that have come in sort of right at the end of people who are also ending careers and not sure what they're going to do, and hoping maybe for a similar job but remote, or and I just think really thinking about what both Mark and Lucy Rose have been talking about, of embracing this time, and just thinking about how do you want it to be, and what steps, what learning maybe you need, or what things you want to do that might help you get to be able to live this stage in the way you want. So why don't you each, as a final thing, just tell everybody again what your websites are and your emails so that people know how to reach you?
My website is named after my book. It's www.seriousoboutretiring.com. And if you want to be on my blog list, it's mark@seriousoboutretiring.com. No spaces, no punctuation.
And mine is www.lucyrosedesigns.com, and the design has an S on it. That's important because there's another website that's similar. And my email is lucyrosedesigns@comcast.net. And Doris, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm just so delighted. No, I just do want to comment, because this happens to be one of my favorite poets, but Lourdes from the UK sort of ends, and it seems like a nice end of Mary Oliver's quote, "Tell me, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" And I think you've been, both of you, speaking so beautifully about thinking about that and being curious and creating it and being whimsical and being realistically optimistic and all of that. So thank you both, and thank you all for being here. Another wonderful comment that just came in from Mary from Sebastopol. Thank you. Love the focus on using our creativity. It goes way beyond money and retirement. So I think all of these are great takeaways and comments that people have. So thank you for being here and inspiring people, and look forward to continuing conversations with both of you too. So take care, stay well, everybody, and be safe, and take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Revolutionize Your Retirement Radio with Dr. Dorian Mintzer. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show, listen to past episodes, or download our free retirement transition guide, visit revolutionizeyourretirementradio.com.